Hey guys, this is Michelle with Fun with Key West, and today is another episode of First Time on Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are joining us live, let me know you're here. Do a shout out. I'll reply and say, hey. If you are listening on our podcast, thank you so much. And I'm going to say the whole thing like, subscribe, share, all of that. But send me a DM or reach out through our website and say, hey, Michelle, loved this. I want to learn more about that. I've been having some really good conversations with some of you guys lately about books that you guys want to write, books that you're interested in, people we've met and have had dinner with. We're planning a meetup in November of 25. So stay tuned for some of those details. But what I like to do on Fridays is kind of go over what are some of the exciting things about Key West, things you can do, things that you can check out? And even if you're not a first timer, let's say you've been to Key West 50 times. Great. I'll bet you we'll talk about something you don't know about or haven't tried. So that's what First Timer Friday is all about. I am, if you are watching me live or watching me on video, you're going to see that I am in my Orlando office and air conditioners are running. So I'm hoping that this audio comes in well enough for you to be able to get the gist of what I'm talking about. But today we are going to focus on Key West is a town or an island of stories. There are so many stories. If you check in on our Historic Marker Monday, you're going to know that we talk about the stories behind those markers. Today, we're going to talk about some of the famous authors that are connected with Key West. And some of the most famous authors who ever put pen to paper have a connection to Key West. And shameless plug, that is what a lot of our book club is about. Come join us. I'll put a link down so that you can check it out. But our book club is all about books every month that have some sort of Key West connection. And I got to thinking, I don't know if everybody understands how many authors are actually connected to Key West. And I'm telling you, the potential is absolutely amazing for our book club. So be sure to sign up for our book club. You can do that over at FunInKeyWest.com. Check out the book club tab, sign up. It's all there. But if you love books and literature, Key West is absolutely your destination and your go-to place. Hemingway wrote there, Tennessee Williams swam there, Robert Frost reflected under the palm trees in the wintertime, and Judy Blume still calls the island her home. And those of you who are part of our book club, or those of you who support us through the VIP club, Chapters and Cocktails, this episode is to help entice and get you all excited about what's coming up. And if you're not part of our book club, get you excited about joining. So let's talk about what some of the things that happens in Key West. And Key West seems to get under a writer's skin, right? It's maybe the sounds, it's the weather, it's the roosters, it's the coconut palm trees, or it's just the vibe that we get in Key West. Time just melts away. And from the moment that you cross over the overseas highway, if you're driving down the Keys to Key West, you just step into Key West and you just get into this slower rhythm. You understand why so many American authors call this place home. And Key West has been absolutely a sanctuary for creative souls. Today, you're still going to see artists up and down Duval. You're going to see their studios. Go check them out. Go. I'm not saying you have to buy all of their art, but just go in and appreciate it and take a look at it and see what the full scope of what these artists do. There's photographers, there's painters, there's sculptors, there's jewelry artists, there's everything. And Key West is certainly a sanctuary for these creative souls. It's a place that people come to escape deadlines. It's a place where they come to escape expectations and even, as Robert Frost did, winter. Every corner has a story. And if you listen closely, I think you hear those stories as you wander through the town. So let's talk about the legends that have lived in Key West. You can't start this conversation off without noting Ernest Hemingway. So he is obviously, if you don't know this, a Nobel Prize winning author and a Pulitzer Prize winning author, or a Pulitzer Prize recipient. And he made Key West his home, and his home still stands today, and you can go visit it. It's over on Whitehead Street. He arrived in 1928 with his second wife, Pauline Pfeiffer. And thanks to a wealthy uncle of hers, they received a wedding gift, which was that stunning Spanish colonial home with lush gardens and all of these trees. And that's where it sits today. And that was Hemingway's first real house, and it became home to his creative life. Here in Key West and at that home, he wrote and worked on Green Hills of Africa, the snows of Kilimanjaro, and For Whom the Bell Tolls. And so many stories that short stories and everything else that he wrote were inspired by his deep love of deep sea fishing, travel, adventure, and you can see this spark in the imagination as you read the books and you sit around his home and just take it all in. And his writing studio that you get to peek into, it literally looks like he just got up, went to refill his rum, and was coming on back. It's a beautiful place, and it just rolls right into his creativity and our love for his books. We know when Ernest Hemingway was not writing, although he wrote every morning, according to some of the research I did. He was at Sloppy Joe's Bar, originally on Green Street, and we know the story. It went from Green over. And so, Captain Tony's was the original spot, and then we moved over to the now location of Sloppy Joe's. But you can hear him swapping stories with his good friend Joe Russell, who was a local ship's captain and a little bit of a rumored bootlegger. And their friendship inspired more than a few of the tales that shows up in some of his famous books. You also can sense as you walk by Blue Heaven, it wasn't Blue Heaven then, but he supposedly partook in boxing matches there and watched over all of all the activities that occurred there in that location. He is, of course, a notorious cat lover, and that's a lot of times why people go to the Hemingway house because they want to meet the descendants of the original Snow White polydactyl cat who was named Snow White. And a polydactyl cat, if you don't know that, has 6 fingers on their hands. And yes, I'm going to say hands, not paws, but they have 6 fingers. And so they have that little extra toe. And they are just amazing. And they're still, the descendants of Snow White still wander through the Hemingway estate today. And you get to meet them. You can tour the Hemingway home. I highly encourage you take the tour. You learn all of the backstory about the remodeling, everything that was done in the Hemingway home. Keep in mind, Pauline removed the fans from the home. And up until just about maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was no air conditioning. So when you toured the Hemingway home, it was a little stuffy come July and August. But thanks to some support of donors, they were able to install air conditioning so it's more comfortable when you stroll through the Hemingway home. You get to peek into his office and check that out. You get you really see how he lived and who he was. You get to see the aspect of Hemingway, the fisherman, the war correspondent, the author from Oak Park, Illinois, and yes, the man who enjoyed a good brawl and a stiff drink over at Sloppy Joe's. Key West does celebrate Hemingway every year, and in July, because that is his birthday month, they celebrate Hemingway Days. Oh, and at the Hemingway Days, they have Hemingway lookalike contests. They have a Marlin tournament usually. Arm wrestling happens because Hemingway was really into that. And they even have a writing competition that you might be able to meet a descendant of Hemingway because they're usually hosting it. And it's one of those only in Key West events that you're going to encounter. You have the running of the bulls, which I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it. You just have to go to Hemingway Days and experience that. Our next famous author who was part of Key West is Tennessee Williams, and he lived over on Duncan Street. So just a few blocks off of Dall, you're going to find 1431 Duncan Street, and that was the tranquil home of Tennessee Williams. He was a playwright, and he first arrived in Key West in 1941. And Key West quickly became his sanctuary. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, and he's known for A Streetcar Named Desire, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and The Rose Tattoo. And so they found their way into not only screen and on stage, but really reflects the peace that Tennessee Williams experienced in Key West. And I think that comes through in his writing. He loved supposedly to write in the morning, and then he swam in the afternoon. And so he found that balance, his life balance, work life balance back then. And so he worked and swam, and he loved his two-story home there on Duncan and his lush gardens. And it was his haven for decades. There's a fun story that goes around about Williams was baptized at St. Mary's Star of the Sea while quite intoxicated, according to local legend. And so that was scandalous for the time. And supposedly he met up with Hemingway over in Cuba at the La Florida, and they bonded over health complaints, Hemingway's plane crash injuries, and of course, Tennessee Williams complained about his liver, which we know was not in the best of shape. But you can tour the Tennessee Williams Museum on Truman Avenue, and it celebrates all of his famous works, his personal life, and his enduring connection to Key West. And each March, Key West honors him with an entire month of performances, poetry readings, film screenings, and everything during the Tennessee Williams month. So if you're coming in March to Key West, be sure to check those out. Another one, which I bet you did not realize, is Robert Frost. And so if you thought the Florida Keys was only cocktails and sunsets, meet Robert Frost, the poet laureate of America's Calm Introspection. He began visiting Key West in 1934, and he spent nearly 16 winters in Key West. He lived in a small cottage behind Jesse Porter's home on Caroline Street, and it's known as the Robert Frost Cottage. And it's a serene hideaway, and it has lush gardens around it and shade trees. And Frost is quoted as saying, Key West was his place to breathe. We can all relate to that, right? That's our place to breathe. It was here he reflected, he wrote, and he even entertained other famous people like the other authors that were in town. The cottage still stands today, and so you'll be able to go check that out. Other literary greats who loved the island and lived on the island. You have Elizabeth Bishop, who lived on White Street first and then Elizabeth Street, probably because of her name. She crafted poetry that captured the rhythms of the sea. One of my favorite authors is Shel Silverstein, and he wrote children's classics. And he has some really wicked adult humor, and he lived on William Street. His house was unfortunately destroyed in, I believe, Hurricane Irma, but his spirit still is there. And after you read Where the Sidewalk Ends, think you get a new perspective of where his brain was going because you are literally at the end of the sidewalk in Key West. I met somebody who in the mid 90s was in Key West and living in Key West. And they talked about being able to go to some of his interesting dinner parties. And I'm telling you what, the stories about who was around the table and all of the antics are just amazing. Of course, you have Jimmy Buffett, who lived in Key West, and he recorded music. His sound studio is still standing in Key West. And this is where he turned his storytelling into songs. And we know the story that his first house, his first apartment was next to Louis' backyard. And he references where he is in terms of being next to Louis' backyard in several of his songs. And of course, he has books that he has written as well. And currently, you have Judy Blume, who lives in Key West, and she is the queen of coming of age stories. She lives in Key West and runs Books and Books, and it's a locally owned bookstore. And they highlight authors and all kinds of things. So be sure to check that out. And she often pops in to meet people. So you just might never know if it's going to be there. So you have from Hemingway's Six-Toed Cats to Tennessee Williams' red shutters on his house and Robert Frost's small cottage. Key West has always been a magnet for dreamers, right? Aren't we all dreaming? Maybe it's the sea breeze, salt air, or the way the sunsets remind us that life and art have a tendency to move at their own pace. Either way, this small island, Key West, proves that even the wildest spirits can find peace and paradise. If you're looking for some of these landmarks or you want to attend some festivals, let's point some of these out. As we talked about Ernest Hemingway, you can visit his home. It's over on Whitehead Street, and you can meet those famous Hemingway cats and see the writing studio. On Truman Avenue, you have the Tennessee Williams Museum. And then over on Caroline Street, you have the Robert Frost Cottage. An interesting place to check out is over on Simonton Street. You have Casa Antigua, and that today, I think there's an escape room on the bottom, but that is where Hemingway and his wife stayed when they first came into Key West, because keep in mind that the car dealership was there, and their car that they were supposed to be picking up was not ready yet. And so they stayed, and all of a sudden, Hemingway fell in love with Key West, and the rest is history. And of course, you have Books and Books over on Duval Street, which is Judy Blume's bookstore. It's actually not on Duval Street, it's off of Duval Street, but be sure to check that out. As to festivals, in July, you have Hemingway Days, which is absolutely a kick. It's so much fun. March, the whole month of March, you have Tennessee Williams and is celebrated. They have plays and readings and screenings and so much. And if you can't be in Key West during those festivals, just go head over and check out the Tennessee Williams exhibit in the museum. In January, you have the Key West Literary Seminar, and people from all over the US come in, and you've got writers and poets and readers, and they gather all over and have a conversation. There's also the Book Fest, which is a smaller event, and that occurs in November at the Key West Library this year in 2025. It will be November 15th. So if you're going to be in town, be sure to check that out. So that creative spark that inspired Hemingway and Tennessee Williams still burns, I think, in Key West. I meet all kinds of new authors who are developing new stories and new ways to intersect their storyline in a Key West setting, or they're looking at the history of Key West and creating stories that are built off the history of Key West. And that is why I think you guys, if this is sparking some of your imagination, you're like, oh, I want to check out some of these books, be sure to check out our book club. We are having a blast over there. We have a private Facebook group and we chat about these books, and you just never know what's going to be next on the list. And if you want to take it to that next level, I encourage you to check out our VIP club. That VIP club gets you a digital magazine every month. It's about the book. You get cocktail list and sometimes recipes and some extra stuff all around the book, and a Spotify playlist, as well as a video call every month. And we can sit around and talk about the book, Key West, whatever you want to talk about. So, yes, West might be known best for its nightlife, but it's also a sanctuary for storytellers. Every street from Whitehead to Duval holds some sort of ghost or echo or shadow of famous works that were developed off of inspiration in Key West. Creative minds are everywhere in Key West. So whether you're planning your short trip down to Key West or you just need to escape to Key West through the books, I think we've got everything you're going to need over at FunInKeyWest.com. Be sure to check that out. So this has been Michelle, and I am with FunInKeyWest.com. I am your island guide, and I am reminding you that in Key West, every story ends with a sunset and maybe a cocktail or a mocktail. In the meantime, head over to FunInKeyWest.com, sign up for our happy hour list, sign up for our book club, and let's keep the conversation going. We'll talk to you later. Bye.